In this first video on corporate governance, we will discuss the idea behind corporate governance, which involves the oversight of management to ensure that they are following shareholder preferences. Corporate governance involves a series of mechanisms which will be detailed in the second video. In this video, we first focus on the theoretical foundation behind why these mechanisms are needed and why shareholders need to oversee managers. It's important to note we are focusing on the oversight of public corporations here, where there are shareholders and managers are hired to perform the actions and manage the company in the interests of shareholders. In the public corporation, we have the separation of ownership and managerial control. In other words, the owners or the shareholders own shares of stock, but those shareholders tend to own shares in many companies, and therefore they're not involved in the day-to-day management of the company. They hire an agent, the manager or the CEO and the top management team, who then run the company and are supposed to run the company to pursue shareholder interests. This gives rise to the agency problem, where the interests of the owners or the principals may not be aligned with the interests of the agents or the managers. And so several areas of where these interests may be unaligned are around the idea of growth versus earnings, where shareholders really want the managers to grow the firm and increase the earnings. However, managers may be better served by choosing slower growth options that are less risky and by slowing down the growth in earnings. Furthermore, the idea of risk diversification and risk aversion represents another area of unaligned interest, because shareholders, because they own shares in many firms, have their risk diversified across these many firms. Thus, if one firm fails, their risk is protected because they then have other ownership in other firms that are likely to balance out these losses. However, managers, the agents, most of their wealth and income and reputation is focused on this single firm in which they're working. Thus, they may be more likely to be risk averse. They may desire strategies that are less risky to protect their own interests. Thus, we see an instance where managers have a preference for a safer, less risky firm, whereas shareholders have an interest for a greater risk and greater return. The fourth one listed here on unaligned interest is where managers, given the power and control to make decisions, may often make decisions that are in their self-interest. And this may be conscious or subconscious decisions, but essentially what they're trying to do is increase their own power and their own job preservation. And so they may do things to protect their jobs or to increase the benefits that they experience, such as greater bonuses or things that make their life better, such as corporate travel using corporate jets or country club memberships, etc. And then the final area of unaligned interest is this idea of empire building, where again the agents, the managers, may desire to increase their own power by building larger and larger corporations. Now, in theory, this could be done in a way that benefits shareholders, but oftentimes some of these empire building decisions may destroy value for shareholders. Thus, there may be here again an instance where the shareholder interests are unaligned with managerial interests. Thus, the agency problem here, the separation of ownership and control in large public corporations, creates the need to oversee management and make sure they're operating according to shareholder interests. With this separation of ownership control and the fact that the owners are not always in the presence of managers and cannot always oversee managers, it gives rise to the ability for managers to pursue their own self-interest, which is the heart of agency theory. There are several aggravating factors that will make this pursuit of self-interest and the existence of unaligned interests between managers and shareholders more likely. First, when there is a greater free cash flow in the firm, this creates the possibility or the potential for managerial opportunism, where managers will use that free cash flow in ways that may not directly benefit shareholders or may not perfectly be aligned with shareholder interests, again, such as spending on greater perks in the job or maybe empire building. Second, market pressure. Pressure from the market, in particular those same shareholders, creates pressure on management to make decisions, but also puts management job, wealth, and income at risk. Thus, when managers face greater pressure and their wealth is and income is at greater risk, they are more likely to try and pursue self-interested decisions that are risk averse. And then finally, executive compensation, which is one of the mechanisms we'll get to in the second video. Executive compensation can actually influence managers to behave in ways that are against shareholder interests. It's an unintended consequence. So we will get into how this mechanism can actually create more problems with agency theory, even though it's designed to reduce the problems. As a result of these aggravating factors, in order to make sure managers are not pursuing their self-interest over shareholder interest, shareholders incur governance costs. These are costs that shareholders incur to make sure managers are acting and using the firm's resources in a way that pursues shareholder interest. The first governance cost is through incentives. They pay managers through various incentives such as stock options, and bonuses. And these incentives are designed to reward managers for pursuing shareholder interests, but each one of these incentives takes money out of shareholders' pockets to pay managers to do that, and that's a cost. Two, shareholders incur monitoring costs, and these costs could be in multiple forms, one being the board of directors. Shareholders hire a board of directors or elect a board of directors, and they pay them considerable amounts of compensation to monitor management. In addition, shareholders may also hire outside monitors, ratings agencies, and other independent third parties to monitor management. Again, these are costs. And third within monitoring, shareholders may actually hire within their own firms or spend their own money on hiring analysts to watch over and to keep track of what managers are doing relative to the competition. The third and final governance cost is really sort of an end result when things go wrong. But when there are issues and when managers are pursuing self-interest and making poor decisions at the expense of shareholders, shareholders have to bear enforcement costs. And this could be the enforcement cost of firing a manager and paying a severance, or it could be the enforcement cost of hiring a law firm and paying for lawyers to sue the managers for breach or negligence or breach of fiduciary duty. Thus, these governance costs are incurred by shareholders, taking money out of shareholder pockets to make sure that the managers act according to shareholder interests. In the second video, we will dig deeper into the governance mechanisms where these costs are incurred.